As we get into part 3 of the book, part 3 is looking at individual influences, school, etc. So we're moving away from theory and into research. So, what impact do our individual traits have on delinquency? First of all, what do we mean by a trait? We're talking about relatively stable ways of perceiving, thinking about, and behaving towards the environment and ourselves. And certain traits may increase the likelihood of delinquency. Research also looks at these clusters that they call super traits. So, low self control is a super trait, and it's composed of several specific traits. There is a debate over how many super traits there are and what they consist of. So there's three main ones we're going to look at here: low verbal IQ, low self-control, and irritability. Low verbal IQ is defined as individuals have trouble expressing themselves, remembering information, and thinking abstractly. So how does this increase the likelihood of delinquency? Well, our book is going to look at this as it relates to each of the theories. So it increases strain because it makes it more difficult to achieve goals. It reduces the likelihood of being reinforced for conventional behavior, and it leads to poor school performance, thus weakening one's stake in conformity, and reduces the ability to foresee consequences and exercise self-control. Low self-control, as I mentioned, is a super trait, and it consists of several specific traits: impulsivity, which is the tendency to act without thinking of the consequences, and a strong preference for immediate rewards as opposed to delayed rewards; risk-seeking, hyperactivity, low ambition, motivation, or perseverance; and amoral beliefs or beliefs favorable to delinquency. So this makes it difficult to achieve goals through legitimate channels and makes it likely that you'll upset others, who then may respond to strain, making it therefore more likely that you'll respond to strain with delinquency. Being attracted to rewards associated with crime, because these rewards are typically immediate as opposed to delayed. They may find crime rewarding in and of itself and likely to view crime favorably. And think about low self-control and control theory. This one should be a pretty obvious connection. They're less constrained, less thought given to consequences. And in terms of labeling theory, these people are more likely to be labeled and treated as bad. Irritability is another super trait. It's a heightened sensitivity to stress and strain, a tendency to attribute your problems to the malicious behavior of others. It includes being self-centered, having little concern for the rights and feelings of others, and an aggressive, antagonistic interactional style. This is going to lead to these people provoking negative reactions from others. It also means they're going to be more sensitive to strain and more inclined to cope with strain through delinquency. This trait may also cause them to be rejected by conventional peers. They may also find crime more rewarding. It means they're less likely to respond to direct controls, and again, more likely to be viewed and treated as bad. So why do individuals differ in these traits? Well, they differ for biological reasons and environmental reasons. In terms of biology, this can come from genetics or biological harm, okay? These things then in turn create a predisposition for crime because they influence the likelihood we'll develop those traits conducive to crime. It does so through how it affects our central nervous system and our autonomic nervous system. One of the ways we try to look at biological harms is through adoption in twin studies. So twins that are identical twins have the same DNA. We can also look at adoption because it allows us to sort of separate out biological traits inherited from parents versus the environment in which the child is raised. But we need to think about a few things here. First of all, it's really difficult to separate those things out. And even kids raised in the same home by the same parents are not always treated the same way. We also want to think about the fact that the extent to which crime is inherited could vary by type of crime and type of offender. So genetics is only going to be partly responsible. How your genetics interacts with your environment is really going to play a key role. And biological theories today tend to be what we call biosocial theories, and those are ones that are looking at that interaction between biological theories and the environment. So where does biological harm come from? It can come from mothers' poor health habits during pregnancy, complications during delivery, kids who've been exposed to toxic substances, head injuries. There's some problems with some of this research, though, as it doesn't always control for relevant third variables. And there's also very few longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies look at things over a period of time, as opposed to just taking like a snapshot one moment in time. How this impacts our central and autonomic nervous systems is it may lead to dysfunctions in the frontal lobe or the left hemisphere of the brain. It could also lead to an underarousal of your autonomic nervous system and reduced levels of serotonin. These in turn increase the likelihood that you'll develop traits conducive to crime. And there is evidence of both genetic and biological harm effect on our individual personality traits. So when we think about traits, they're also part of our environment. And in particular, our early family environment and our social class play a role here. As I mentioned, though, it's very difficult to separate out these effects. Social environment can impact your biological harm, and biological factors can affect our social environment.